Welcome back to this environmental series on CNC3. My guests are Senator Penelope Beckles, former Minister of Environment, and Dr. Joth Singh, the MD CEO of the EMA. Dr. Singh, let's come back to this whole question of environmental police. Where are they? I've never seen an environmental policeman.
Well, I'm surprised to hear you say that. I think the environmental police certainly have been very active as far as the issue of quarrying is concerned, for example, and where action has been taken. It has been through the environmental police. I think as things go in Trinidad, we sometimes don't recognize the good work that people do, but we recognize the work which is not done, and that is the work, that is what makes the news. But I would share with you that although our environmental police is a small unit, just currently 15 in Trinidad, they're very active. They're out there doing work, and not only engaging in issues related to littering, on a small scale, but supporting the enforcement of the legislation which falls under the EMA, which deals with certificate of environmental clearance, noise pollution, and they're always out at FETs monitoring, ensuring as much as they can. It's a capacity issue, as you would imagine. Issues related to water pollution, etc. So they're out there doing work. I think what we need to do as a solution is really to expand the capacity of the EMA in the context of an enforcement capacity with regards to the environmental police, and we've put recommendations already to government to have that done.
And we hope that that happens quickly. Yeah. Senator Beckles, over the last 3 months or so, we have spoken to experts. They suggest that our main environmental problems include solid waste disposal, sewage waste, toxic industrial chemicals entering our surface and groundwater, uncontrolled quarrying, poor planning approval processes leading to flooding, uncontrolled quarrying, and indiscriminate clearing of land. Why was all this allowed to happen?
Okay, but I want to also deal with the fact that a lot of the policies have been put in place. Now, normally you need to have your policies before you put in place the legislation. For example, we approved in 2006 the Integrated Water Resource Management Policy. That policy now allows for the drafting of legislation for the protection of your water courses, and that is before the CPC. That was done in 2006.
Let's talk about this though. Yes. Why did this happen? All these problems, the sewage waste, the toxic industrial chemicals.
Okay, well, you're talking about a country where you have had rapid industrialization. And we compare Trinidad and Tobago, for example, a lot of other islands in the Caribbean, Barbados, St. Lucia, but they have not had your Escort, you haven't had your Point Lisas, you haven't had your Petrotrin, and over the last 40 years, we have had rapid industrialization. You have had housing, you have had, construction of major industries. And of course, it means that your legislation, your planning has really to keep up with all of these things. And the fact is that that has not happened.
But why does everything take so long? In 2006, yes, it was decided by the previous government to shut down the Beetham. Nothing has happened. The Beetham is still running. It's still toxic. Well, it's still unlined.
You talk about implementation. I was a minister at the time. You have the Beetham, you have Guanapo, you have Forest at Forest Park. The decision to ensure that we had a new system of waste management was then given to SWIMCOL. You had international tenders from all over the world, and for me that would have probably been my greatest success story if it happened. We set up a committee to do the tendering, because that is always probably the most complex thing. You want to be transparent, meet of people from forestry, from the EMA, from the Ministry of Planning. And then the decision came back that none of those persons had met the criteria. Now you have to understand that as a minister, if you do, you die. If you don't, you die, in the sense that ultimately it's your responsibility. Because if it doesn't happen, then the blame falls with you. But you are not, if I can just finish, because this is an important point, you are not part of that process. Now what has happened since then is that the Minister of the Environment of Nova Scotia came to Trinidad. And I know that there have been some developments. I can't say what has happened since then to take it a lot closer in terms of getting there. So, I'm hoping that Minister Munilal would continue to ensure that where we were not successful there, that he would be able to be successful.
Your comments, Dr. Singh?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with setting the policy in place and enacting legislation to ensure that we have a legal framework in terms of action. I think we need to set up the right institutions. And I think we have moved in that direction. And when we set up institutions, we need to give them appropriate capacity to be able to do the work that they have been entrusted with. And I think organizations in Trinidad, and it's not unusual for developing countries, in many circumstances we are under capacity and taken on a very large task. And in the context of Trinidad, certainly with the industrial drive and the way that our economy operates, which is based on industrialization, it's still an energy-based economy. Rapid industrial development. We have had many challenges. I think the development model might have not been the most appropriate, and it's something that we need to relook. And the issue of sustainable development needs to move from lip service and talk to real action on the ground. And so it has to be a more balanced approach. So the institutions need to be well structured, well designed, well supported, get the best people as well, because sometimes we don't, because our systems do not allow it in one form or another. And then get the population on board. I think education and outreach is a critical issue. I think, in the context, and one of the things that I've looked at when I joined the EMA is the investments made in educating our public and looking to see what has been the result. The result, if you just use littering as an indicator, has not been significant. We have not changed attitudes significantly in Trinidad, and you have to ask your question, what have we not done right? And I think, therefore, it has to be a combination of enforcement, because, again, I think, when you develop habits, sometimes they're very difficult to change.
Yes.
And so maybe you need to be encouraged to change them, not only being asked to change them, but maybe encouraged to change them through the enforcement of legislation and laws, which makes sense.
Yes.
And I think the current administration has moved in that direction in terms of the fine system, so making it, something which would be a real deterrent for someone who decides to throw something out of their car, that they are charged something which hits them in their pockets,
Yes.
rather than something that they just say, okay, well, that's not big thing, I can pay that, doesn't make a difference to me.